Hi, I welcome you to another episode of the Western Mass Business Show. I'm Ira Bryck, and I'm proud to say this is our second in a long series of hour-long episodes. So if you're used to listening to this for half an hour, please cancel your next appointment so you can tune in, but it will be on the podcast page after. So today I have two people that I've known for years. They are not from Western Mass, but I call on them for their expertise in family business. Every year, I would go to this meeting in Evanston, Illinois, the Psychodynamics of Family Business Group, and I was so honored to be in the presence of 30 amazing family business consultants, no more amazing than these two, who is Jeff Savlov from New Jersey and Barry Graff from California, two people that consult to family businesses. So nice to have you both here.
Yeah, thanks, Ira. We're cool enough to be from Western Mass.
Yeah, definitely. We will let you come in.
Glad to be here, Ira.
So that was Jeff and then Barry, just so you know their voices. So let me just start with each of you just saying a little bit about what was your intro to family business. Were you damaged in early childhood and then decided to join your family business and do this kind of work? Let's hear from Jeff first and then Barry.
Okay, we're both politely waiting for directions.
Yeah.
Who goes
Okay.
first? One of my introductions was my dad throwing a garbage can at me at our family business, which was a print shop. My dad was not a violent man. My dad never hit me my entire life. He was actually angry with an employee, but it was still humiliating. I did get out of the way of the garbage can. He was far enough away that I had time to duck. But that was just, there were ups to being in a family business. My mom and dad and I were heavily involved and in a smaller print shop in New Jersey. And we had actually a large commercial print shop in New York where we did sort of like high-end lithography and stuff. But bottom line is, family business is pretty intense. My dad and I realized that there are two things that we should never do again. We did them once and we should leave them alone. One is have him be a coach of one of my sports teams, and the other is have him be my boss. So I left the family business. There was not a lot of drama, had the experience, learned from it, went into the corporate world, sales and marketing, and kind of went my own way, but something stuck with me about it, the ups and the downs, the good and the bad. And I went back and trained as a family therapist and then started doing consulting work and working with families now. So many of us in this field had some kind of family business experience, and that's a small bit of some of the drama I went through and a little bit of my history.
So you got in through doing social work and so on, and then how did you get turned on to the family business aspect of it? I mean, aside from your own past consulting.
Yeah, well, so I left. I worked in sales and marketing in the corporate world. I became a family therapist, and 25 years ago, I started a private practice in clinical psychotherapy. And really, that's where I thought my career was going to stop. And it was really just by coincidence that clients coming to me for talk therapy, psychotherapy, they were coming for marriage therapy, or their adolescent kid was acting out. But a couple of them also had businesses, and there was so much there. When you're working with somebody and couples counseling or with their teenager, whatever, in family therapy, you get to know them in a pretty deep way. And all the issues were just right there. And I felt like there's a way in which the family dynamics and emotions and relationships have an effect on the business, and having a business that you're sharing as a family and transitioning from one generation to the next has an effect on the family and the emotions and the relationships. And as a therapist, I felt like there's something that is not therapy, but it's also not what a typical MBA, CPA, attorney type consultant does. And so I started to get involved at that point on the side of my consulting practice, of my therapy practice 25 years ago. Started to get involved with helping people in that middle area between the family stuff and the business stuff, and just kind of built it over time. That's where I spend most of my time now.
Yeah. And the stories are intriguing. I mean, there's a reason why there's so many movies and TV shows about family business plots.
Yeah. Tons of great stories. Yeah.
Yeah. So Barry, what is your background?
Well, there was really two-stage process getting me to family businesses. In 1966, I was in graduate school. And we were focusing a lot on individuals, working with individuals. But a famous family therapist came for a seminar and presented a family and it just got me. I said, oh, this is it. This is where I belong. So for the next 20 years, I worked with families as a therapist. And then in the 80s, managed care came along and insurance changed. And frankly, as a business decision, it was not easy to have a private practice in family therapy. And I was at another conference, and a therapist brought an example of a family. And I said, oh, this is a family business. That's interesting. Let me explore that.
Right.
And I did.
Yeah.
And since 1989, I've been working only with family businesses.
So let me just ask you, I have like a few questions, but feel free to roam around. I know that you both are very capable of that. So I just want to start with this question. Somebody we all know, Dennis Jaffe, wrote a book recently on the premise of that what makes a healthy family and what makes a healthy family business are pretty much of 100% overlap. Can you just give me your opinion on that kind of thing?
Well, I'll start. I think, first of all, Dennis Jaffe is smarter than I am, so I'll do the best I can.
Okay.
There are certainly foundational elements that help both systems, the family system and the family business system, but they're not exactly the same. But underlying everything, communication, good conflict resolution and decision-making, and probably the bottom line for me is differentiation for individuals. And what I mean by that is not that everyone goes away from each other. It means in relationships, I can be myself and we can also be intimate and connected. And family business adds a dimension to that. It's a challenge in every family and every relationship, going from the I to the we. The family business adds a dimension to that. And sometimes the path through the family business helps the family be healthier. But there are different challenges. I'm not going to love my son or daughter less because they don't function well in the business, but that doesn't mean I'm going to give them the role that they aspire to. And how we work that out, yes, in that way, the how we communicate, how we can each be ourselves in that context, that is common.
Right. Okay. So I'm just going to leave that and not dig in more because Jeff has something to say about that too.
Yeah, one of the things that strikes me is an area where there's not overlap. So, a little bit of the distinction, which is, in the family, generally, you're part of the family. You're part of the family, right? And you're accepted kind of unconditionally in most cases, hopefully, as part of the family. I think in the business, the healthy family businesses, it's different. Not everybody automatically gets in my opinion, in the businesses that I would call healthy. And if they do get in, it's because of what they have to offer. So I think the family businesses that get into trouble, okay, we're all part of the family and we overlap, like sort of, I'm not sure if this is what Dennis is saying, but the families that get into trouble say we're all part of the family and now we're all going to be part of the business, and regardless of what you have to contribute, you're all getting in, you're all getting paid the same, you're all going to get a nice high level executive position and salary, and a lot of trouble comes from that. So one of the areas where maybe there's not so much overlap of family and business, and the family businesses that I would say are healthy, is that they really think about who gets involved and in what position and what kind of compensation, and they're thoughtful about it. A lot of families don't think early on that you can be involved by being an owner, but not work in the business if you don't have something to offer. And there are also family businesses that say, you know what, if you're not working in the business, you shouldn't have ownership. And some family businesses say, hey, only if you work here can you own. And some of those choice points can be a tension between the healthy family and the healthy business. But I think the healthy families can understand we're doing what's best for the business and can accept that maybe not everybody gets in, or not everybody can have an executive position, or some people own but don't work there, other people own and work there.
And I would imagine that an emotionally mature, well-balanced family can do things differently than a family that is stressed and confused. Maybe one needs a policy where the other doesn't.
Yeah.
What are those things look like to you, of policies that will reign in an unhealthy family, et cetera? Can a policy reign in an unhealthy family?
It can. In the best of circumstances, adding a policy or a structure helps people do better. If they get there beyond their own personal challenges. And so, for example, in meetings, we have a set of ground rules. One of the ground rules is listen for understanding, not for agreement. And all of us in our lives don't always do that.
Right.
But when it's an official meeting, when that's on a board in front of everybody, it's easy to go back to that. Even though when we get to Thanksgiving dinner, we're not going to follow that guideline.
Mm-hmm.
So I think structures and policies help a lot.
Right.
I think role definitions help a lot because it differentiates. No, you're not my brother or sister. You're the head of sales. I'm the head of manufacturing, and we got to figure that out, no matter how we feel about each other.
Yeah. No, I have just to finesse the question a little bit for you, Jeff. I have found that families that can't follow those simple ground rules that you set up, or who can't role play, can't do a little role reversal, they are kind of doomed.
Yeah, no, there's something to that. Being able to be playful, being able to be self-reflective, being able to sort of have process, to your decision making around the family and the business. There's a great article if you Google, and this kind of dovetails with what Barry was saying, sort of about ground rules, general expectations. If you Google Harvard Business Review fair process, the first hit will be this amazing article, which is so good for family businesses. And it basically has to do with the importance of hearing each other out. The fair process research, which is in this, it's a short article. It's really worth reading. It basically says that if you don't get what you want, but you feel like people really listen to what you have to say, you will be more satisfied than if you get what you want and nobody really listened to what you had to say. It is so important to people to feel like they are heard and that someone listened with respect, that even if you don't get what you want, you're likely to be more happy. And I think that is such a crucial piece of research and a great article for family businesses, the importance of hearing each other out, because there's so many times where people have different choice points, different decisions, different visions of where things should go. If the best you can do sometimes is hear everybody out and then make a decision that's going to piss off some of those people. But at least if you heard them, there's less likely to be problems. And that not every family can do that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, fair process is kind of dependent on transparency and honesty, which are not everybody's tools.
Yeah.
I was just reading an old family therapy book of mine yesterday, just browsing through it. And one of the quotes was, "The surest way to unhappiness is getting what you want."
Right.
That's great.
Well, maybe you're always asking for too much, knowing you're going to get half of it. Now you get twice of what you don't want. So let me just ask you, the phone rings and it's somebody from a family business asking you for help. Is it the person with the checkbook or the person who feels robbed? Who is it that calls you, and then how do you get in?
Yeah, you want to take it first, Barry?
Sure. There's a range. More often than not, in recent years, it's been someone from the younger generation. But I don't know why this is, but they're doing it with the knowledge and permission of the older generation. They're not going behind the older generation's back. It's just they're the ones who are more comfortable, or they've talked to a professional advisor who's given them my name. So it starts there. But my way of seeing things is always the whole family's on the phone, even if only one person's on the phone. And they may or may not be representing them well, but in some way or other, I get a sense of, yes, this person's talking to me, but how they're presenting it very much portrays who the family is.
Okay. So let me ask Jeff I'm sorry. Barry,
no, go ahead.
I have a thought. Can I just add to that?
Yes.
And then you can push me in any direction.
Yes.
But I agree. No matter who's on the phone, the family's on the phone. Only I try to get the family on the phone. Most people are reaching out by email, not by phone nowadays. So I respond and, to more or less saying, "Hey, great to hear from you. Can you tell me a little bit about the situation?" So I can decide, have a sense of who's best to get on this first call. And then I try to get more than one generation and several people on the very first call. So before I even speak directly with anyone by phone or in person, I try to set up a video call. This is even before COVID. I was doing video calls to get several people, different generations on the very first contact, so that I'm hearing different sides of the story all at once, and no one person had my ear before anyone else. It's not always possible. And so sometimes you do talk to one person with an ear for the family, but it's great when you can get a bunch of people and then you get the real data.
Yeah. And sometimes I would say, I don't work for you, I work for the good of the family business. And I thought that's not really true. I mean, I want to save the family more than I want to save the business. So next one is, what do you do to build trust with a family? Because you need to be the honest broker, but obviously you're going to have opinions about what people are saying and see that somebody's a tyrant or whatever. Either of you.
That's a great question. And I think there are two levels of that. I think there, number one, you have to be a genuine person. Mm-hmm. Families are, the vast majority of the families I work with are not just looking for someone with the right answers. They're looking for someone who can be part of their family in a small way, where they know, even if they're fighting with each other, they want to know that you're going to be supportive of all the relationships. Mm-hmm. And I think how you communicate in that right from the beginning is a key part of that. And a key part of that is sharing yourself in a genuine way. Mm-hmm. So saying things like, yes, sometimes it's hard for me to talk to someone when I have angry feelings and I just don't know what to say, right? Or whatever it might be.
Yeah. So I don't want you to always answer the same question. So I'm gonna twist it a little bit. When I first started at the Family Business Center, there was an article on my desk called "Why Fire the Family Business Consultant?" And it was making the point that sometimes you just need to relieve pressure, like in a pressure cooker, and they hire you, they tell you their story, and then they fire you and they feel better a little bit. Does that happen to you guys?
Yeah, absolutely. I think sometimes just that way, you get hired, you help them to see what's really going on. Often they know what's going on and they're just not talking about it. They start to talk about it, it's painful, and they may get sort of frustrated and fire the family business consultant and just sort of do it on their own, but it gave them what they need. Or sometimes you're able to give them a lot of the help they're looking for, and they fire you, so to speak, because they've really done all the work. But sometimes the sort of letting go of the business consultant happens well before the work is done. But they're able to show themselves that even if it's a little painful and hard at times, we were able to have the conversations. We got the issues out on the table. We can do this, and we can move on and call you in the future if we need you.
Okay, so Barry, here's my twist on that question.
Sure.
Did you ever get fired, or I mean, it's not always fired. Sometimes you just don't get a next appointment, which is like getting fired, because they liked it like that? They liked the chaos and the confusion and the hostility?
No, that has not happened. Uh-huh. Maybe that's the luck of getting families who really want to make things better. I think I'm a big systems person, which means I see it all connected. The business, every member of the family, even spouses who will never work in the business. And I think we all should get fired. Mm-hmm. And I feel best when I get fired when the family is on its way. And they're going to, the goal is independence, is not permanent dependency. And sometimes literally that has happened after the initial session that Jeff talked about with the whole family there. The family kind of got it. And that was the end because something had shifted. Mm-hmm. There's a consultation where you shift the family 1 degree to the right, but then they're on the road and you start 1 degree to the right and you'll be 90 degrees to the right eventually. Mm-hmm. And there are other families, you got to go 1 step at a time. And then when they feel safe in that new direction, then they say, all right, we're back to us.
And you have had some clients for decades, right? I mean,
I had one client that I facilitated a board meeting twice a year for 20 years. Uh-huh. And after about 15 years, I kept saying to them, you don't need me anymore. You'll be fine. You're doing great. And they said, no. We don't think we need you, but we want you here just in case.
Right. But after 20 years, you might have shifted them 20 degrees already.
Well, it was the shift came fairly quickly,
Uh-huh.
and we had to keep addressing some difficult issues. But it was a great family. It was just three siblings who had inherited a lot of land, and they were they sold all the land, and we stopped when they had sold all the land. But very early in the process, they started making decisions, and they never made a decision that was not a consensus. 20 years, there was never a 2-to-1 vote.
Mm-hmm.
And so that to me felt like, okay, we got it. But
Yeah.
they felt like they needed me, and actually a couple attorneys who sat in on the board meeting too, to buttress them just in case they went off the track.
You know, in my mind, I don't think that's an unhealthy dependency that they still wanted you around. I wonder if you would agree, Barry. I think it can just be they like the support, they like the structure. It helped them deal with some kind of underlying tension, not a horrible tension, but just the tension of natural, siblings being together. I wonder if you would agree that it's not necessarily unhealthy that they still wanted you there.
No, because when they had sold all the land, they said goodbye, and in a very meaningful way, and they went off the way, and they're still our siblings.
Well, Robert Duvall worked for the Corleone family for many years as the consigliere. So you're kind of a consigliere there. So next question is, so what are some of the common conflicts and problems that any family business, no matter how healthy or game they are, what are some of the things that keep coming up for each of you?
Go ahead, Jeff.
Sure. Fairness, right? Fair versus equal is such a big thing. Though there's one version of fairness that is equal, right? All three kids, executive positions, same salary, even though one went to college and has an MBA, one went to college and dropped out early, and one, barely finished high school. This is an actual situation I'm thinking about. They all got the same ownership. They all got the same salary. They all got these sort of equal executive positions. That is a recipe for disaster, because the person who worked hard and got the MBA and got all that background experience is going to resent that the younger
and that might have been that the parents didn't want to say, we love one of you more, or think that you're the smartest or something like that.
Right. Or you deserve this more than your sibling. For them, this is right, some kind of expression of fair, equal parental love. But so that's just one example. But roles in the business, compensation, who gets how much ownership, those are really complicated things to figure out. And going back to the earlier question of, can a policy sort of help a family be healthy, or whatever the question was. I mean, this is where sitting a family down and laying this out. I've had families call me and try to hire me to tell them what they should do. Should we give our daughter who's not in the business the same amount of ownership as our daughter and son who's in the business? And they want an answer from me. I'm like, you'll find someone out there to give you that answer. It's not me. I want to sit you down with all three kids and look at the pros and cons of all these choices and figure it out as a family. That's the fair process idea. Let's sit down. Let's look at the pros and cons, and let's figure out something as a family that makes sense to all of us, versus making a decision because my attorney or whoever told me to. This is how they see it work the best, and then just plop it on the heads of the next generation without a real good understanding or involvement and input.
Okay. So I'm changing the question. So Barry,
Hey.
you are both trained therapists. I'm a trained children's wear retailer and later an educator and mediator. I'm not a therapist, but many times my clients say, this is kind of like therapy, and they kind of like it and they kind of don't like it. Do you find like your people are looking for psychotherapy or family therapy, or is that just a special skill that you have in helping them figure out their business relationships and all of that?
Yeah, interestingly, occasionally they see this as therapy, but that's more rare. This is really about reducing the pain and expanding the positive connection between us while we keep the business successful. And they're pretty clear about that.
Mm-hmm.
So I certainly have referred some clients to therapy, not necessarily the whole family, usually individuals or couples or a pair, but sometimes I do something that is therapy-like.
Uh-huh.
And what I mean by that is just communication and conflict resolution.
Yeah.
People expressing feelings to each other doesn't have to be therapy. It's not about having pathology. It's just about, it's not simple to communicate with each other, so we have to work at it.
Right.
Can I share an add-on to that?
Yes.
I know you don't want us both doing the same question, but I'll make it quick. So just Tuesday, Barry and I were on a call for the psychodynamics of family business. And one of the major issues was, since most people in that group are trained clinicians who also do this family business consulting, and we were really talking about how often families know we have this other background or this other hat and secretly want therapy, and they're just going through the consulting route because it seems sort of an easier way. So it's certainly something I've run across, and I think other people on the call have been there, where people sort of push the boundaries because they don't want to say they want therapy, but they're kind of hoping that's the way it goes. And when I'm in that situation, I never do both. I'm clear, if I'm coming in as a consultant, I'm a consultant. If you need a therapist, I will make that referral, and you can get it from a therapist.
Right. Okay. That's great. So we are halfway through. Again, I'm retraining you, my dear audience, to stay with me for the whole hour. Please listen to our sponsors and stay tuned for the next half of the Family Business Show, the Western Mass Business Show, rather. And we'll be back right after this. Hi, we're back on the Western Mass Business Show. I'm Ira Bryck. And I just want to say that we are now on for 6 years. We have almost 300 guests. You can see all of our past episodes, or hear them at least, at whmp.com. Go to podcast, Western Mass Business Show. And if you own a business and think you have a story to tell, please give me a call at 413-575-5850. So my guests today are Jeff Savlov, who is a family business consultant from near Princeton, New Jersey, and Barry Graff, who's from San Diego, California, and both of them are respected colleagues of mine. When I would be at these Evanston Psychodynamics of Family Business conferences, whenever I would see either of them about to say something, I would perk up and stop doodling. So I'm glad to have you both here. So let me just ask you, is there a difference between the problems that face a big business or a small business? And let me tack onto that a part B that you can just get right into is there a generational difference? If you're doing something from the so-called greatest generation versus the baby boomers versus the millennials, are there different family business problems? Big versus small generations? Barry.
I'll tackle big versus small.
Okay.
Because I think about that a lot. And I've had a great range. I've had international companies and I've had little teeny startups, and the issues are very similar. Quite simply, the smaller ones, their life is at stake sometimes. Mm-hmm. And the bigger ones, their life is not at stake. Mm-hmm. So certainly they have big decisions to make that have to do with the business staying profitable and growing, et cetera, but they don't have to face, if we make a wrong decision here, or if we keep fighting, we're done. We're out of business. So that urgency is more present in smaller businesses. Mm-hmm. But the communication issues are often very similar.
Right.
The second thing is, in bigger businesses, there are more non-family managers. Uh-huh. And so making sure you integrate family and non-family is very important. In a smaller business, it's more likely that even to the second generation, only family members are leading the business. And that's right. Fine, but it does make it different.
So meritocracy is good in either case, but if you have a lot of managers, you better make sure they're good.
Well, yeah, and it's easier to do that with a lot of non-family people.
Right.
And then, of course, the issue is the family member being paid too much or too little? And the norm is that they are paid too much or too little.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Either too little because we want to show people that we're really invested in them, or too much because, well, I'm your son and you have to pay me more, and they haven't resolved that.
Well, so let me just stick with Barry for 1 minute, then we'll give Jeff 2 extra minutes. My father, in business with my father for many years, he would always say to me, you need to be when you're a family member, you need to be twice as good to get half the credit. That struck me as BS for some reason. I can't quite put my finger on it. Can you?
Well, I think there is a truth in that. But it's not about performance. I think it's about integrity. Mm-hmm. I think if you're a family member, which means you're at the core of the business, there has to be a great deal of trust built. And in the vast majority of businesses I've worked with, the non-family employees who have been around for years and years, sometimes decades, feel like family in the business.
Mm-hmm.
You mentioned trust before with a consultant. There's a ton of trust within all those people
Mm-hmm.
for the family. So I think that's truer on the level of integrity and trust. As far as performance, I think family should be judged the same as anybody else.
Okay. So Jeff, do you want to pick up on you can talk about big and small, but also the generational differences? Do you see that there are different styles between the generations?
There's, in terms of what Barry said about, the bigger ones typically have non-family managers. That's almost always the case. When something gets really, really big, you just can't have enough offspring that have those competencies, right? Just because you might be an entrepreneur that started something doesn't mean your genetics are going to transition to your kids and they're all going to be great CEOs. So you really have to, include non-family people who have skill sets that you need. A great example of not doing that is Forever 21, the retailer. Mm-hmm. There's a good article in the New York Times, maybe a year ago, I forget, but it's searchable. And it's a story of how they just would not incorporate non-family high-level executives, and the family just didn't have, they never did. It was their first time having a billion-dollar company. They started it from scratch. They came from, I think, Korea, started with nothing, and it just got so huge, and they were so out of their league. And when they did hire non-family managers, they wouldn't let them really do their thing, and it really was the downfall of the whole thing. Another thought I have on this big and small thing is there's two different kinds of big, at least two different kinds. There's the .com billionaire who really has a wife and maybe a couple of kids that might enter the business, and it's a billion-dollar company, but one owner and a couple of kids. And then there's the billion-dollar huge company that's got thousands of employees, and it's just interesting. The .com billionaire is sort of big in numbers, dollars, but it's really a small family that has to make decisions. And then there's the other kind of big. I've worked with billion-dollar level companies where you have the family is massive. You get to the third, fourth, fifth generation. I've worked with really big family businesses where there's 100 cousins. Try to imagine 100 cousins making a decision about anything. And if you don't have, real governance, representative governance, where like a small group of 8 people is assigned certain tasks and they'll communicate with the larger group. If you don't do that, it's bound to like self-destruct, because I don't even get along with half my cousins. I can't imagine, or even know them really well. I can't imagine owning a business with them, let alone 100 of my closest cousins. The generational thing, I'm not sure what to say about that. Certainly the greatest generation, and even, the baby boomers are very different than the millennials. And so you have to sort of respect where each generation is coming from and their style. And I think every generation wants to say the next generation is screwing it up. We did it the right way. Right. I see plenty of families where there's an appreciation for the strengths of the next generation. Yeah. And I think when the senior generation has some sense of respect and appreciation for what the next generation brings, that's really beautiful and goes well.
Certainly the so-called the greatest generation did have more allowance to be command and control. I think the younger generation feels a little pressured to be more egalitarian, which might not be easy. Somebody has to be the decision maker, for instance.
Well, I think that is part of our transition from the individual leader is the answer to teamwork is the answer. Mm-hmm. And partly that, I think that is a result of women being more in leadership positions. And so that is a difference in the generations. Mm-hmm. 2 generations ago, we depended on one person and it was a man. And now we depend on people in relationship, and that's men and women.
Yeah. So that leads me into my next question, which is, I had heard, and I don't know if this is a factoid that's not true, but that, I guess a few years ago, it became that more women were running family businesses than ever before. I don't know if it was the majority, but then there was a little fact about it, was that the women were never the first choice of their parents. It was always after the son had blown up. So what is your whole view of that, of women taking over companies and how they get along with their fathers versus their mothers and that whole gender topic?
I can say I've heard the first part of that, and I've seen a lot of research that there are more, presidents of family business companies that are women than, out there in the general business world, there are more women on boards of family businesses than there are women on boards of the non-family business world. So I think, women are getting a lot more opportunities in the family business world. I've never heard anything that it was sort of a second choice, and it doesn't bear out what I've seen. I've seen women who are much more competent and well-trained and educated than their brothers kind of get the
I'm not saying they aren't. It's just the brothers given the first chance.
no, but I've seen the sisters be more competent, well-trained, and not get the opportunity, and I've seen them get the opportunity, but I don't see any sort of widespread, let's see what our sons can do, and if not, we'll take our daughter. I haven't seen that.
And I would add on to that before Barry comments is, I know there's one psychologist years ago that was saying that fathers and daughters get along a lot better, and mothers and sons, cross-gender, has an advantage. I'm just wondering what else you want to say about that or any other gender thing.
Well, I have not seen sons fail so that daughters can take over. I have seen a progression, and partly this depends on the part of the country it's from, with women just being seen as they're equal, and whoever has skills, whoever has the motivation, let's look at it. If they all do, or if they both do, then how can they work together? Is it an issue for the son working for his sister? And let's talk about that. But we're still going to choose the sister because she's the right person for the job. So I've seen more of that, but not everywhere.
Yeah, and I would agree, part of the country and also part of the world, it gets really different, this stuff. So, traditional parts of the world, it's, firstborn male all the way.
Right. So there was there's Yvonne Landsberg is one of the good thinkers of family business, and he had something about office of the president and co-leadership, and he was saying that 2/3 of the time it will fail because they lack the all for one and one for all. What do you have to say about that?
I have a strong comment. I'm sorry, Barry, did you want to say something?
No, go ahead.
Just, I say how often with the family clients that I work with that, this is a team sport. When it's done well, it's a team sport. If you really like, running marathons where you're all in your head for those couple of hours, or singles tennis where it's just you against an opponent and you're the only person on your team, that's not really the family business mindset. That might be an entrepreneurial mindset. But family business, it's like a football team or a soccer team or a hockey team. It's a real team sport. There's interdependence. You have to, when you see a really good championship team in any sport, a team sport, inevitably they're talking about how everyone knows their role. They pitch in however they can. It's all for the greater good. And I think the families I work with, where the families are sort of healthy and happy and thriving, and so are the businesses, they have that attitude of, how can we contribute for the greater good? And I think when it's more of a singles tennis mentality, it just doesn't work so well. What were you going to say, Barry?
Well, I certainly am a similar mind, but I also think it's a naive way of looking at power. Because one person owns 100% and is the CEO and is chairman of the board, it's easy to say he has all the power. That I don't think that's ever true. Not in families. I think in non-family corporations it may be true. I think in families, emotional power is underneath the surface all the time, and how people affect each other is there all the time. And if dad in that case truly is not sharing anything with anyone, it will only lead to distance in the family.
So what would be, Barry, just to follow up on that, what would be an example of somebody who uses their emotional intelligence to not have power, but to have influence in a company that's not a position power?
Well, let me actually answer it from the other side, which is the person who's the leader. The leader really listens and is impacted by what they see. Now, that doesn't mean they always do what even the majority of the rest of the family wants. But as Jeff said earlier, the rest of the family feels like they were listened to, they were understood. It's impacted dad's thinking. And at another time, he'll go in our direction. Okay. A small personal example. When my father-in-law was still alive, he lived to 95. for the last few years of his life, all the holidays were at our house.
Mm-hmm.
And he would, like clockwork, ask me, Barry, do you want to sit at the head of the table or should I?
Mm-hmm.
And I would say, no, you did. Dad, you sit at the head of the table.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a perfect example of that.
Right.
I loved that in those situations, he was, quote, the head of the family. He
Yeah.
wasn't deciding anything. Doesn't matter. It felt right because we had a relationship.
Well, and so one way I would kind of categorize that is that family has more of an abundant feeling and less of a scarcity feeling. Would
Absolutely.
you?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. So how do you grow that? If you grew up in a scarcity family, how do you become more of an abundant leader of the next generation?
That's a great question.
Yeah.
Well, if your land is arid, find some land where you can grow things.
Mm-hmm.
So it's your choice of the family your spouse and the family you build, the choice of advisors or therapists you work with, the people who are your friends. And oftentimes in those situations, people need to learn how to look for abundant relationships.
So not be trapped by your so-called destiny of your family. I was born in an arid family and that's my fate.
Right. And we've had this interchange a number of times. Because my parent is not capable of loving me in an abundant way, doesn't mean I can't love them in an abundant way.
Mm-hmm.
And that's one way of building the abundance. And so it's a natural part of the transition of I become the elder at some point when my parents become frail. I'm going to take care of them in emotional ways as well as physical ways.
Right. So here's my question for Jeff. So I put out a call of who wants to be on my show, and you had suggested you instantly went for my idea of like, let's get Barry instead of your idea, but you wanted to come on with your wife, who's your business partner, and your mother, who you said was a fabulous mother. I thought that was so lovely. I wish, that every family had that, but well, here's my question. It's kind of a switcheroo. Do you ever get into situations with families that you said, this family is really triggering my issues personally, and I need to really stay balanced here, or I'm going to screw them up with my own screw up?
Yes, is the easy answer. Would you like me to say more?
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. This is intense. And yes, there's times when, the father and the client family is like my father in ways that were really hard, or like my mother in ways that were really hard. And it brings that up, and it's only natural. That's why I spend a lot of time, Tuesday, I was on this call with Barry and the other people from PDFB where you've attended, Ira. We meet one weekend a year, but we've stayed in touch now, especially with COVID, more frequently. And I'm involved in study groups where I have just colleagues that I can present my cases anonymously and just sort of talk about what I'm getting pulled into, and just have other sort of pairs of eyes that are just supporting me and calling me out and helping me make sure that keeping my role in the appropriate way, because it does stir up a lot of stuff.
Mm-hmm. Barry, you want to add to that? Or?
Sure.
Yeah.
The advantage of being old and having done this for a long, long time, I really like when they stimulate my stuff. And at core, it's always stimulating a fear, whether the fear is about confrontation or about intimacy or about adequacy. And those are human characteristics. And sometimes if I feel that, I'll share it with the family right away.
Mm-hmm.
The way of moving forward. I want them to stimulate all the parts of me. And it's kind of nice to see that, oh yeah, I still got that part. I haven't, that'll maybe never be worked out totally, but that's the way it is. When
clarify that you will share that with a family, with a client.
Not always, but sometimes, yeah. And I feel quite free to do that because it's just how life is,
Right.
I'm not particularly afraid if someone yells at me, but when I see a father yelling at a son, does something vibrate in me about when my father was big and I was little? Of course it does.
Mm-hmm.
That's the natural order of things. And
Right.
so that when I share that, you start with what is, and then you talk about now, how can we deal with that?
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Yeah, I would agree. It can be really an assessment tool when you are just sort of comfortable in your own skin and can just let yourself feel what's coming up in you. Often that tells you something about what's going on and helps you to better understand the
Mm-hmm.
family. And like Barry, yeah, I think it's great to share that and use it.
Yeah. So I think all three of us probably have some version of what we call the chemistry meeting to just see if we resonate with the family. If they trust us, you can be the most honest broker in the world, but you remind them of somebody that ripped you off. How do you establish that? Like, what goes into seeing if you have chemistry and if you can be helpful?
I I had some very interesting thoughts about this last week, and actually, it played off a case that Jeff presented a couple of years ago, where he presented a family, and very quickly things just moved forward in just a lovely way.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought a lot about it and asked about it at the time, and I didn't know that, at least for me, we pinned down how that trust developed instantaneously between Jeff and that family. And what I came to last week is I think sometimes the consultant and the family fall in love on the first meeting.
Mm-hmm.
Now, what do I mean by fall in love? Because it's not romantic fall in love. It means the sense very quickly, we really should be in this together. And that sense of not just the expertise, because all of us, not only three of us, a lot of people we know have equivalent expertise to us, but there's just something about the clients feeling like this person will know us kind of naturally.
Mm-hmm.
And the feeling on our part is, I belong here in some way. It's very vague, but it's the basis of a lot.
Well, then how do you not get drawn in? You're the consultant, but I consulted to a family once where they had a non-family CEO CFO. And she said to me, my rule for myself is I go to funerals, but not to weddings. Right. It almost seemed like she knew what her obligation was, but she didn't want to step into the family circle.
Yeah. I think about that differently than some people do. I want to be pulled in as long as I have the facility to get out as quickly as I want to.
Mm-hmm.
I want to be pulled in because I think when you're in the middle of it, you really understand how things work in the family. But she's correct. You also need to have that distance to be useful. And so for me, it's a matter of moving in and out of the family, sometimes on a moment-to-moment basis. So when I'm in, it's like I may feel absolutely helpless to know how to do anything. And then I step out and I may say, while I was in there, I felt like a member of the family and I felt helpless to have any effect on anything. So what can we do to change that? Because I'm guessing all of you feel that too.
Right. I mean, I think I have this in common with the two of you, but I can't imagine either of you doing your job without bringing your whole self, as they say in the, whatever that song is, put your whole self in and shake it all about.
Hokey pokey.
Hokey pokey, that's right. Yeah. So we have 4 minutes remaining, and I want you each to do this, is just give your contact info, but also the short version of what your first encounter with an interested family looks like.
Sure. My email is bdgraff@gmail.com. That's B as in boy, D as in dog, Graff, Graff as in Frank @gmail.com. And that's the best way to start an interaction in these days. My first contact, it would be lovely if the whole family would call on the initial call. And I would certainly encourage that. But it starts however it starts. And I, like Jeff, as quickly as possible, get to the whole family.
Mm-hmm.
And that may be, if there's a lot of conflict, it may be one at a time first on a phone call. But then there'll be an initial family meeting where we really assess, should we work together or not? Does that fit? And then we go from there.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And Jeff?
Yeah, an easy way to find me is just to Google Jeff Savlov. That's S as in Sam, A, V as in Victor, L-O-V as in Victor. Search Jeff Savlov Family Business Consulting. You'll find me. My website it's kind of long and complicated, but it's www.blumandSavlov.com. Search me in family business consulting, you'll find it. Thanks for asking me to share that, Ira. Basically someone calls, if I have to speak to the first person because they're not comfortable getting more people on, obviously I'll do that. I do try to get, I'll take an hour Zoom. There's no charge. It's just like a free consultation to see if there's some kind of mutual interest. After that, I'll generally spend a half day with the family. This is still before any formal proposal or engagement, but I'll spend a half day in different subgroups, get the family together, get different generations. And after the end of that half day, they really know me and how I work. I really have a sense of their situation. I can tell them honestly if I think I have something to offer, if I think there's a better professional for them, and they have a sense of if they are comfortable with me and they want to work with me, and we'll figure out the next steps.
Mm-hmm. Okay, that's great. So is there any just closing statement, if you were now speaking to the world of family businesses, just one little bit of wisdom that you each have, what they should do today?
I just listen to each other.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And Jeff?
I think the more you can live meritocracy, where people enter the business and get paid and compensated and all that based on what they bring to the business, I think that's one of the simplest things you could do to really guarantee a long, successful business. It can be hard on the family, but I think when you get the full picture, the family that buys into that and lives by it, you can have a just great family and business all together.
That's great. Well, so it was a pleasure speaking with both of you. I just want to say to anybody that's listening to this, I completely vouch for both Barry and Jeff. I would trust my own family to you. And this is the Western Mass Business Show. Please listen every Saturday at 11, and there will be a second airing during the week. We'll figure out when that's going to be. And again, all of our 300 shows are at whmp.com. Go to podcast, Western Mass Business Show. So with that, I say thank you for listening and tell your friends, and see you next week.